Hey guys, tonight we begin with a journey into what being a woman was like in medieval times. A realm of bloodletting, birthing beds, and barley bread. We're talking about an era where your value was measured in dowries, your body belonged to everyone but you, and your life expectancy was about as trustworthy as a plague doctor's fashion advice. Forget the romantic notions of courtly love and elegant ladies in flowing gowns that Hollywood sold you. Tonight, we're diving into the brutal reality of what it actually meant to be a woman in medieval times. When survival was a full-time job, privacy was a luxury that didn't exist, and your reproductive system was considered public property. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So you've just been born, and congratulations. You're a girl in the year 1347. The midwife holds you up, takes one look between your legs, and the collective sigh from the room could power a windmill. Your father, who's been pacing outside like a caged bear, hears the news and immediately starts calculating how much your eventual marriage will cost him. Not how much you'll bring in, how much you'll cost. Because you, my dear, are not an investment, you're an expense with legs. The midwife wraps you in rough linen that feels like sandpaper against your newborn skin. There's no soft cotton onesies, no gentle baby lotion, no carefully sterilised everything. Just scratchy cloth that's been used for countless other babies, assuming it's been washed at all. The smell in the birthing room is a fragrant symphony of blood, sweat, and whatever herbs they threw around, hoping to ward off evil spirits. Spoiler alert, the evil spirits are the least of your problems. Your mother, if she's managed to survive childbirth, and that's a big if, considering maternal mortality rates hover around 20%, looks at you with a mixture of love and profound worry. She knows what's coming. She's lived it. She's about to raise you for a world that will systematically limit, control, and endanger you at every turn. The room is lit by tallow candles that create more smoke than light, casting dancing shadows on walls that haven't seen fresh air in months. The windows, if there are any, are covered with oiled cloth or thin slices of horn, creating a perpetual twilight that makes everything look like a sepia photograph of despair. The air is thick enough to chew, a mixture of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and the lingering scent of whatever died in the walls. Your first breath is medieval air, a cocktail of pollutants that would make a modern environmental scientist weep. But you don't know any better. This is just life. This is just the beginning of your journey through a world where being female means navigating a maze of restrictions, dangers, and expectations that would make modern women's rights activists spontaneously combust. Now that you've survived your first few years, and congratulations, because infant mortality rates are playing dice with your life, you're old enough to start learning what it means to be a woman in medieval society. And the lessons begin early, like a comprehensive course in how to accept your inferior status with grace and humility. You wake up each morning on a straw mattress that's seen better centuries. The straw pokes through the rough cloth covering, creating a sleeping surface that's less comfortable than a bed of nails and significantly less hygienic. Your pillow is a sack filled with whatever was available, maybe feathers if your family's well off, more likely just more straw or even wood shavings. The smell is a constant companion, musty, earthy, with hints of whatever small creatures have made their home in your bedding. Your first lesson of the day is silence. Good girls don't speak unless spoken to. Good girls don't have opinions about anything important. Good girls certainly don't question why God made them the inferior sex. You learn this not through gentle instruction, but through swift correction, a sharp rap across the knuckles, a firm slap, or simply being ignored until you remember your place. The clothes you wear are miniature versions of adult female oppression. Heavy wool that scratches against your skin, layers upon layers, designed to hide your developing body from the moment you show any signs of becoming a woman. The fabric is rough, undyed and practical. Beauty is vanity, and vanity is sin. Your clothes are designed to last for years, which means they're built like armour and about as comfortable. Your diet consists mainly of whatever's available and cheap. Breakfast might be pottage, a gruel-like substance made from whatever grains are on hand, mixed with water and maybe some vegetables if you're lucky. It has the consistency of wallpaper paste and roughly the same flavour. You eat it with your hands or with a wooden spoon that's been carved by someone who clearly had no concept of ergonomics. Your days are filled with learning domestic skills that will define your entire existence. You learn to spin wool, sitting hunched over a spinning wheel for hours until your back aches and your fingers bleed. The wheel makes a constant whirring sound that becomes the soundtrack to your childhood, a mechanical meditation on the repetitive nature of women's work. You learn to weave, working at a loom that's taller than you are. The threads cut into your fingers, leaving permanent calluses that mark you as a working woman. The pattern is always the same, simple, functional, devoid of any creativity or personal expression. Art is for men. Beauty is for men. Your job is to create utility, not beauty. You learn to cook, standing over a fire that fills the house with smoke and makes your eyes water constantly. The cooking pot is a massive iron cauldron that weighs more than you do, suspended over flames that lick at your face whenever you lean in to stir. The heat is unbearable in summer, but the fire never goes out. It's too precious, too difficult to relight. The food you prepare is basic survival cuisine, bread made from whatever grains are available, often mixed with sawdust or ground acorns when times are hard. Vegetables that have been salted and preserved until they're more salt than vegetable. Meat is a luxury reserved for special occasions, and even then, it's usually whatever couldn't be sold at market. The tough, stringy bits that require hours of cooking to become even remotely edible. Your education, if you can call it that, consists of learning to accept your fate with Christian humility. You learn that Eve's sin cursed all women to be subservient to men. You learn that your body is a temple, but it's a temple that belongs to your father, then your husband, then your sons. You learn that your thoughts, your desires, your dreams, all of these are secondary to your primary function as a wife and mother. You learn that questioning authority is not just wrong, it's dangerous. Uppity women are accused of witchcraft. Outspoken women are branded as scolds. Independent women are seen as threats to the natural order. The lesson is clear. Blend in, keep quiet, and accept whatever fate has in store for you. So you've managed to survive to the ripe old age of 13, and suddenly everything changes. Your body begins its transformation into something that medieval society views as simultaneously sacred and dangerous, a woman's body. And congratulations, because you're about to discover that puberty in medieval times is like navigating a minefield while blindfolded. The first sign that your childhood is over comes with your first menstrual period. There's no preparation for this. No helpful books, no mother-daughter talks, no understanding of what's happening to your body. You wake up one morning to find blood on your shift, and the panic that sets in is primal. You think you're dying. You might be dying. In medieval times, you never really know. When you finally work up the courage to tell your mother, her reaction is a mixture of sympathy and dread. She knows what this means. You're no longer a child. You're a woman now, with all the dangers and restrictions that come with that status. She hands you strips of rough linen to use as makeshift sanitary pads. There's no adhesive, no comfort, no discretion. You fold the cloth and hope it stays in place while you go about your daily work. The pain is immediate and constant, Menstrual cramps hit you like a mule kick to the gut, but there's no time to rest, no understanding that this is something that should be accommodated. You're expected to work through it, to pretend nothing is happening, to maintain the facade that women are just as capable as men, despite the monthly reminder that your body has other plans. The smell is unavoidable. Without modern hygiene products, you're constantly aware of the metallic scent of blood mixed with your own body odour. You change the linen when you can, washing it in cold water because hot water is a luxury and soap is expensive. The cloth never gets completely clean, taking on a permanent reddish-brown stain that marks it as part of your monthly shame. Your diet during this time consists of whatever's available, with no understanding of nutrition or the extra iron your body needs. You feel weak, tired and irritable, but these are seen as character flaws rather than natural responses to blood loss. You learn to suffer in silence, to push through the pain, to never let anyone see that you're struggling. The worst part is the isolation. During your menstrual period, you're considered unclean, contaminated, dangerous to be around. In some communities, you're not allowed to touch food, to enter the church, to be near men. You're treated like a walking plague, a reminder of Eve's sin and women's inherent corruption. But menstruation is just the beginning. Your developing body becomes a source of constant anxiety and surveillance. Your breasts, no matter how small, must be hidden under layers of cloth. Your hips, as they widen, mark you as ready for childbearing. Your very existence becomes a challenge to men's self-control, and therefore your responsibility to manage. You learn to bind your chest, to hunch your shoulders, to make yourself as small and invisible as possible. Your natural posture becomes a defensive crouch, designed to minimize your feminine attributes. You develop a permanent ache in your back and neck from constantly trying to hide your body from the world. Your clothes become more restrictive, more layered, more designed to conceal rather than comfort. The undergarments alone are an exercise in medieval torture. Rough linen that chafes against sensitive skin, tied so tightly that breathing becomes a conscious effort. Over this goes a heavy wool dress that reaches your ankles with sleeves that cover your arms completely. The whole ensemble weighs about as much as a small child and allows for roughly the same range of motion. Your hair, once allowed to flow freely, must now be covered completely. A wimple, a cloth covering that frames your face and hides your hair, becomes your daily uniform. It's hot, uncomfortable, and makes you feel like you're perpetually wearing a tent, but uncovered hair is seen as seductive, dangerous, an invitation to sin. Better to suffer in silence than to tempt men with the sight of your natural beauty. The food you eat during this time is carefully monitored and restricted. Too much meat might make you lustful. Too many spices might inflame your passions. Your diet becomes a carefully calibrated exercise in suppressing your natural desires, designed to keep you docile and compliant. You learn that your body is not your own. It belongs to your father, who has the right to arrange your marriage. It belongs to your future husband, who will have the right to do with it as he pleases. It belongs to the church, which dictates what you can and cannot do with it. The only person who doesn't have a say in your body is you. Now that you've reached the ripe old age of 15, your father has decided it's time to convert you from a financial liability into someone else's problem. Welcome to medieval marriage negotiations, where you're the commodity being traded and your opinion matters about as much as a chicken's thoughts on Sunday dinner. The process begins without your input. Your father and the local matchmaker, a woman whose job is basically medieval human trafficking, start shopping you around like a prized heifer. They discuss your dowry, your health, your childbearing potential, and your general usefulness as a household appliance. Your personality, your dreams, your preferences. These are about as relevant as the weather on Jupiter. The negotiations happen in your home, usually in the main room, where the smoke from the fire mixes with the tension in the air. You're brought out like a prize animal, told to stand straight, smile, but not too much, and demonstrate your domestic skills. You spin wool, while strange men evaluate your technique. You serve ale, while they assess your grace. You speak only when spoken to, and even then, your words are carefully chosen to showcase your humility and obedience. The potential suitors are evaluated based on their ability to provide for you and their family's social standing. Their age, their temperament, their attractiveness, these are secondary considerations. You might be matched with a man old enough to be your grandfather, or young enough to be your brother. The age gap is irrelevant as long as the financial arrangements work out. Your dowry is calculated down to the last farthing. It includes whatever money your family can scrape together, along with household goods, clothing, and sometimes livestock. Essentially, your father is paying someone to take you off his hands. The irony is not lost on anyone. You're so valuable that someone has to be paid to marry you. The wedding preparations begin the moment the contracts are signed. Your mother, if she's still alive, helps you prepare for a life that mirrors her own. A life of service, submission, and survival. She teaches you the unspoken rules of marriage, how to read your husband's moods, how to avoid his anger, how to please him in bed without appearing too eager, because enjoying sex makes you a whore. Your wedding dress is the finest you'll ever wear, and it's probably not even yours. It's borrowed from a neighbour or rented from someone who specialises in wedding attire. The fabric is rough wool, dyed in whatever colour is cheapest, usually brown or grey. There's no white dress symbolising purity. That's a much later invention. You wear what's practical and available. The ceremony itself is a public declaration of your transfer from one man's property to another's. You stand before the priest, who speaks in Latin that you don't understand, reciting vows that you've memorised phonetically. The words are about love, honour and obedience, though the love part is more aspiration than expectation. Your husband-to-be is likely meeting you for the first time at the altar. He's been described to you, but descriptions in medieval times tend to focus on practical matters. He has all his teeth. He's not obviously diseased. He can provide for a family. Whether you'll find him attractive, whether you'll enjoy his company, whether you'll be compatible. These are luxury concerns that your society doesn't have time for. The wedding feast is the last time you'll be celebrated for anything other than producing children. The food is better than usual. Actual meat, real bread, ale that doesn't taste like it was filtered through a horse. You eat while the adults discuss your future, your childbearing potential, and the political implications of your union. Your wedding night is approaching, and with it the terrifying reality of medieval sexuality. You've been told virtually nothing about what to expect, other than that it's your wifely duty to submit, and that it will probably hurt. Your mother's advice is usually limited to lie still and think of England, or in this case, think of whatever feudal lord controls your area. The bedding ceremony is a medieval tradition that would be considered sexual assault in any reasonable society. After the feast, the wedding guests literally carry you to your marriage bed, strip you naked, and tuck you in while making crude jokes about your husband's prowess and your impending defloration. It's public humiliation disguised as celebration. Your husband arrives shortly after, possibly drunk, definitely nervous, and almost certainly as unprepared for this as you are. Medieval sex education consists of put it in and hope for the best. There's no foreplay, no consideration for your comfort, no understanding of female anatomy. It's a mechanical process designed to produce children, not pleasure. The pain is immediate and intense. Your hymen tears, you bleed, and your husband considers this proof of your virginity and his successful consummation of the marriage. You lie there, trying not to cry, wondering if this is what the rest of your life will be like. Spoiler alert, it is. The morning after brings new rules and new restrictions. You're now a married woman, which means your previous life, limited as it was, is officially over. You belong to your husband completely. Your body, your time, your energy, your very existence is now his to direct as he sees fit. So you've survived your wedding night, and now you're facing the reality of running a medieval household. Congratulations, because you're about to discover that being a medieval wife is like being a CEO, manual labourer, and personal servant all rolled into one, except without the salary, benefits, or any actual authority. Your day begins before dawn, when the rooster's crow pierces through the darkness like a medieval alarm clock that you can't hit snooze on. You wake up on a straw mattress that's somehow become even less comfortable since you got married, your body aching from the previous day's work and your husband's nightly demands. The room is pitch black, cold enough to see your breath, and filled with the sounds of everyone else in the household beginning their day. Your first task is to restart the fire that's been banked overnight. This is not a simple flip of a switch. It's a careful process of blowing on coals, adding kindling, and praying that you don't burn down the house. The smoke immediately fills the room, making your eyes water and your throat burn. This is the smell that will permeate your clothes, your hair, your very being for the rest of your life. Once the fire is going, you begin preparing breakfast for the household. This isn't just your husband, it's any servants, apprentices, or family members who live under your roof. The cooking pot is a massive iron cauldron that weighs more than you do, suspended over the fire by chains that have seen better centuries. You ladle out portions of pottage, that delicious gruel we discussed earlier, into wooden bowls that are cracked, stained, and probably haven't been properly cleaned since the last plague. The kitchen, if you can call it that, is a medieval hellscape of smoke, heat, and potential danger. The fire is open, the floor is dirt, and the cooking implements are basic iron tools that would make a modern chef weep. You stir the pot with a ladle that's been carved from wood and worn smooth by countless hands. The heat from the fire makes your face feel like it's melting, while the rest of your body shivers in the cold. Your husband expects his breakfast to be ready when he wakes up, hot and waiting. If it's not, you'll hear about it. If it's too hot, you'll hear about it. If it's not hot enough, you'll hear about it. You learn to read his moods like a survival skill, adjusting your behaviour based on how he stomps down the stairs, or the particular grunt he makes when he sees his food. After breakfast, the real work begins. You're responsible for managing the household's food supply, which means preserving meat, monitoring the grain stores, and making sure nothing spoils. Food spoilage is not just inconvenient, it's potentially deadly. You learn to identify the early signs of rot, to know when meat is still safe to eat, and to stretch meagre supplies through the long winter months. The preservation process is an art form of salt, smoke, and prayer. You cure meat by packing it in salt until it looks like a crystalline sculpture, then hanging it in the smokehouse, where it slowly desiccates into something that resembles leather and tastes about the same. The smell of the smokehouse is a mixture of wood smoke, meat, and slow decay, a scent that clings to your clothes and hair long after you've left. Your vegetable garden is your responsibility, a small plot of land behind the house, where you grow whatever can survive the climate and the pests. You spend hours bent over in the dirt, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and praying for rain. Your back aches constantly from the hunched position, and your hands are permanently stained with soil and plant matter. The water you use for cooking and cleaning comes from a well that's shared with the rest of the community. This means daily trips carrying heavy wooden buckets, your shoulders screaming with pain as you haul water back to the house. The well water is questionable at best. It tastes of earth and contains whatever has managed to seep into the groundwater from the surrounding area. Cleaning the house is a Sisyphean task. The floors are dirt, the walls are stone or timber, and dust is a constant companion. You sweep with a broom made from bundled twigs, stirring up clouds of dust that settle again before you've finished. The windows, if there are any, are covered with oiled cloth that filters the light into a perpetual twilight. Your clothes require constant attention. Washing them means hauling water, heating it over the fire, and scrubbing garments against rocks until your knuckles bleed. The soap is harsh, lye-made from ashes and animal fat, and it burns your skin while doing a mediocre job of actually cleaning anything. You hang the clothes to dry wherever you can find space, and they stiffen into rough approximations of their original shape is. The household finances are technically your husband's responsibility, but the actual management falls to you. You count every coin, negotiate with merchants, and stretch the household budget through careful planning and creative economizing. You learn to bargain for better prices, to identify quality goods, and to make do with less. Your evenings are spent spinning wool or doing other needlework by candlelight. The flame flickers constantly, making your eyes strain as you try to see what you're doing. The thread cuts into your fingers, leaving permanent grooves that mark you as a working woman. You work until your eyes can no longer focus, then you collapse into bed, only to wake up before dawn and do it all again. Now that you've been married for a year, your body has finally succumbed to the inevitable. You're pregnant. Congratulations, because you're about to embark on the most dangerous journey of your medieval life, where the survival rate for both mother and child is roughly equivalent to playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded chamber. The first sign of pregnancy is the absence of your monthly bleeding, though in medieval times this could also indicate any number of other conditions, most of them fatal. You wait anxiously for other signs: nausea, breast tenderness, the strange cravings that mark the beginning of your body's transformation into a temporary host for another human being. When you finally accept that you're pregnant, the news is met with mixed reactions. Your husband is pleased, assuming you're carrying a son who will inherit his name and property. Your mother-in-law begins calculating the costs of another mouth to feed. Your own mother, if she's still alive, looks at you with a mixture of pride and terror. She knows what's coming. The pregnancy itself is a 9-month endurance test. Morning sickness hits you like a plague, but there's no time to rest, no understanding that this is a natural part of the process. You're expected to continue all your household duties while your body rebels against everything you try to eat. The smell of cooking food makes you vomit, but you still have to prepare meals for the rest of the household. Your diet during pregnancy is whatever's available, with no understanding of prenatal nutrition. You eat the same pottage, the same bread, the same preserved vegetables that make up everyone else's meals. If you're lucky, you might get a bit more meat, but that's more about social status than nutritional awareness. The concept of prenatal vitamins is about as foreign as space travel. As your belly grows, your clothes become instruments of torture. The heavy wool dress that was uncomfortable before now feels like a straitjacket. You let out seams where you can, but medieval clothing isn't designed for expanding waistlines. You develop a permanent ache in your back from carrying the extra weight while maintaining all your usual activities. Your work doesn't decrease because you're pregnant. If anything, it increases. You're preparing for a new mouth to feed, new clothes to make, new responsibilities to manage. You spin wool until your fingers bleed, weave cloth until your shoulders scream, and preserve food until your back gives out. The baby will need swaddling clothes, blankets, and diapers, all of which you must make yourself. The physical discomfort is constant and varied. Your feet swell until they barely fit in your shoes. Your back aches from the changing centre of gravity. You develop heartburn that feels like you're swallowing fire. Sleep becomes impossible as the baby grows larger, and your position options become increasingly limited. The most terrifying part is the complete lack of medical knowledge. You don't know if your pregnancy is progressing normally, if the baby is healthy, or if you're going to survive the birth. Medieval medicine consists largely of superstition, prayer, and hoping for the best. The midwife might feel your belly and make pronouncements based on folk wisdom, but there's no way to know what's really happening inside your body. As your due date approaches, you begin preparing for what might be your death. You make peace with God, settle any disputes with your neighbours, and say goodbye to your family. The maternal mortality rate hovers around 20%, and everyone knows someone who didn't survive childbirth. You write what might be your final letter, arrange for the care of your other children, and prepare for the possibility that you might not see another sunrise. The birth itself is a medieval horror show. When labour begins, you're taken to a birthing chamber, usually the bedroom, with the windows covered and the fire built high. The room is filled with women who will help you through the process, though their assistance is based more on tradition than medical knowledge. The pain is immediate and overwhelming. Contractions feel like someone is trying to tear you in half from the inside. There's no pain medication, no understanding of breathing techniques, no epidural to save you from the worst of it. You grip the birthing stool, a wooden chair with a hole in the seat, and try not to scream loud enough to wake the dead. The midwife, who may or may not have any actual training, coaches you through the process using techniques passed down through generations of women. She might give you herbs to chew, holy relics to hold, or prayers to recite. The effectiveness of these methods is roughly equivalent to waving a magic wand, but they're all she has to offer. Hours pass, maybe days. Labour in medieval times could last for days, with no way to intervene if something goes wrong. You push when told to push, breathe when told to breathe, and pray continuously that both you and the baby will survive. The women around you share stories of other births, some successful, some tragic, all designed to encourage you through your own ordeal. The moment of birth is simultaneous relief and terror. The baby emerges covered in blood and fluid, and the first question is whether it's breathing. Infant mortality rates are staggering. Up to 30% of babies don't survive their first year. You hold your breath until you hear that first cry, the sound that means your child has at least survived the journey into the world. But your ordeal isn't over. The placenta must be delivered, and this is where many women die. Hemorrhaging, infection, retained placenta. Any of these can kill you in the hours or days following birth. You're weak, exhausted, and vulnerable to complications that medieval medicine has no way to treat. If you survive the birth, you're considered churched, unclean and dangerous to be around. You're confined to your bed for weeks, during which time you're not allowed to leave the house, touch food, or be intimate with your husband. This isolation is supposedly for your protection, but it feels more like punishment for the sin of bringing another life into the world. So you've survived childbirth, and now you're holding your baby, a small squalling bundle of potential that represents both your greatest joy and your deepest terror. Welcome to medieval motherhood, where loving your child is an exercise in accepting inevitable heartbreak, and every day is a battle against forces that want to claim your precious baby. Your first challenge is feeding this tiny human. If you're lucky, your milk comes in properly and your baby can latch successfully. But breastfeeding in medieval times is fraught with dangers. Your diet affects your milk quality, and since you're still eating the same limited selection of foods, your milk might not provide everything your baby needs. You're told to avoid certain foods that might make your milk too hot or too cold. Medieval medicine's understanding of nutrition is roughly equivalent to reading tea leaves. The baby's first few weeks are a constant vigil. You watch for signs of fever, difficulty breathing, or the dreaded failure to thrive. Infant mortality is so high that some parents don't even name their children until they're sure they'll survive. You're torn between bonding with your baby and protecting your heart from the very real possibility of loss. Your days blend into a rhythm of feeding, changing, and trying to keep your baby comfortable. Diapers are strips of linen that must be changed constantly and washed by hand. The smell of urine and feces becomes a constant companion, mixed with the sour smell of spit-up and the musty odour of damp cloth. You wash diapers in cold water with harsh soap, your hands red and cracked from the constant exposure to moisture and lye. Sleep becomes a luxury you can barely remember. Medieval babies don't sleep through the night any better than modern ones, but you don't have the option of taking turns with a partner. Childcare is women's work, and you're expected to manage everything related to the baby while maintaining all your other household duties. You develop a perpetual state of exhaustion that makes you question your sanity. The baby's crying is a constant source of anxiety. In a medieval household, a crying baby disrupts everyone's sleep, affects productivity, and can be seen as a sign of poor mothering. You try everything: rocking, singing, feeding, changing, but sometimes babies just cry. You learn to function on no sleep, to think through the fog of exhaustion, to make decisions when your brain feels like it's filled with cotton. Your other children, if you have them, need attention too. They're jealous of the new baby, confused by the changes in routine, and still dependent on you for their basic needs. You're trying to manage multiple children's needs while your body is still recovering from childbirth. Your older children learn to help with household tasks out of necessity, not choice. The winter months are particularly terrifying. Cold weather brings increased risk of illness, and a sick baby in medieval times is often a dying baby. You watch for signs of fever, cough, or difficulty breathing, knowing that there's little you can do if your baby gets seriously ill. You keep the baby close to your body for warmth, sharing your bed despite the risk of accidentally rolling onto them. Food becomes an obsession. If you're breastfeeding, you need more calories, but food is already scarce. You give your baby priority over yourself, often going hungry to ensure your milk supply doesn't diminish. As the baby grows and needs solid food, you chew meat and bread to soften it, then feed it to your child from your own mouth. The risk of choking is constant, and you learn to watch for the subtle signs that indicate your baby is having trouble swallowing. Illness is a constant threat. Medieval children are vulnerable to a host of diseases that modern medicine has nearly eliminated. Measles, whooping cough, dysentery, and countless other ailments can kill a healthy child in days. You learn to recognize the early signs of illness, to isolate sick children from healthy ones, and to prepare for the possibility that you might lose your child to forces beyond your control. The emotional toll is enormous. You love your children fiercely, but you also know that loving them means accepting the possibility of losing them. You've probably already buried at least one child, and you know that each pregnancy is a gamble with death. You celebrate your children's milestones, first words, first steps, first birthdays, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that these might be their last. Your relationship with your husband becomes strained as you focus more attention on the children. He expects you to be available for his needs, but you're exhausted from caring for the baby. Medieval marriage doesn't include the concept of shared parenting. Children are your responsibility, but your husband's needs come first. You're caught between competing demands, never able to fully satisfy either. The physical demands of motherhood are relentless. You're lifting, carrying, and chasing children while your body is still recovering from childbirth. Your back aches constantly from bending over cradles and picking up toddlers. Your arms are permanently sore from carrying children who are too tired to walk. Your body becomes a geography of aches and pains that you learn to ignore because there's no time to rest. As your children grow, you begin teaching them the skills they'll need to survive in medieval society. Your daughters learn to spin, weave, and cook. Your sons learn their father's trade or prepare for apprenticeships. You're training them for a world that will be just as hard on them as it has been on you, knowing that the skills you teach them might be the difference between life and death. The cycle continues. You're pregnant again. because medieval birth control is essentially non-existent, and your husband has rights to your body whenever he wants to exercise them. You're caring for a newborn, managing older children, and growing another baby inside you. Your body never fully recovers from one pregnancy before the next one begins. Now that you've managed to keep your children alive long enough for them to walk and talk, you're facing another harsh reality of medieval life: economic survival. Your household needs income, and while your husband might have his trade or occupation, your unpaid labour is what makes everything else possible. Welcome to the medieval economy, where women do most of the work and get none of the credit. Your day begins at dawn with milking whatever livestock your family owns. This might be a cow if you're relatively prosperous, or more likely a goat whose temperament makes a medieval serf seem cheerful. The animal kicks, the bucket tips, and you're covered in mud and manure before you've been awake for an hour. The milk is warm and frothy, with a taste that depends entirely on what the animal has been eating, which could be anything from grass to garbage. Your chickens, assuming they haven't been stolen or eaten by predators, provide eggs that you collect carefully, knowing that each one represents potential food or income. You reach into nests that might contain anything from eggs to angry hens to snakes that have taken up residence in the warm straw. The eggs are small, irregularly shaped, and often dirty, but they're protein in a world where protein is precious. The vegetable garden that you tend with back-breaking labour produces whatever can survive in your climate and soil conditions. You grow onions that make your eyes water, cabbages that smell like sulphur when they rot, and herbs that might be medicinal or might be poisonous. Medieval botany being more art than science. You preserve what you can and hope it lasts through the winter months when fresh food becomes a distant memory. If your family's involved in textile production, you're probably spending hours each day processing wool or flax. The wool comes to you greasy, dirty, and full of debris that needs to be painstakingly removed. You wash it in water that's never quite hot enough, using soap that burns your hands and leaves them cracked and bleeding. The smell of wet wool is overwhelming, like a wet dog that's been dead for several days. The spinning wheel becomes your constant companion, its steady rhythm marking the hours of your day. You sit hunched over the wheel, feeding raw wool into thread that will eventually become cloth. Your back aches from the position, your fingers are cut by the rough fibres, and the repetitive motion makes your shoulders burn with constant tension. But you spin because the alternative is having no cloth. And having no cloth means having no clothes. Weaving is even more physically demanding. The loom towers over you, a wooden framework that creaks and groans with every movement. You pass the shuttle back and forth through the threads, your arms stretched wide, your shoulders screaming with fatigue. The pattern is always the same: simple, functional cloth designed for durability rather than beauty. Creative expression is a luxury you can't afford. If you live in a town, you might be involved in trade or commerce. You sell your excess eggs, vegetables, or textiles in the market, haggling with customers who want quality goods at impossible prices. The marketplace is a cacophony of sounds, smells, and human drama. Merchants shout their wares, animals defecate wherever they please, and the smell of unwashed humanity mixes with rotting food and smoke from countless fires. Your market stall, if you can afford one, is a simple wooden table covered with whatever goods you have to sell. You stand for hours in all weather, your feet aching in shoes that provide about as much support as wet paper. Customers examine your goods with the suspicious eye of people who know that quality and honesty are not guaranteed. You learn to read people quickly, who's likely to pay, who's going to argue over prices, and who might try to steal when you're not looking. The money you earn is counted in coins that are irregular, often debased, and sometimes counterfeit. You learn to test silver by biting it, to weigh gold by feel, and to spot fake coins by their colour and sound. every transaction is a potential fraud, and trusting the wrong person can mean losing money your family can't afford to lose. Ale brewing is another common source of income for medieval women. You brew batches of ale in large wooden barrels, using grain that you've malted yourself and hops that you've grown and dried. The process is part chemistry, part witchcraft, and part prayer. Too much heat and the batch is ruined. Too little, and it won't ferment properly. The ale needs to be strong enough to be safe to drink, but not so strong that your customers can't function the next day. The brewing process fills your house with the smell of fermenting grain, which is simultaneously pleasant and overwhelming. You taste each batch to test its quality, knowing that your reputation depends on producing consistently good ale. Bad ale doesn't just lose customers, it can make people sick, and sick customers mean angry customers who might accuse you of poisoning them. If you're widowed, your economic situation becomes even more precarious. You might inherit your husband's business, but you'll need to fight to keep it. Male competitors will challenge your right to trade, customers will question your competence, and creditors will demand immediate payment of debts. You're suddenly responsible for income generation while maintaining all your domestic duties and childcare responsibilities. Seasonal work provides additional income opportunities. During harvest time, you work in the fields from dawn to dusk, cutting grain with a sickle that blisters your hands and strains your back. You glean leftover grain from harvested fields, walking bent over for hours to collect individual stalks that the main harvest missed. Every grain is precious, and missing even a small amount could mean hunger during the winter months. The physical toll of your work is cumulative and permanent. Your hands are permanently stained and scarred from handling rough materials. Your back is bent from years of hunching over tasks. Your feet are deformed from standing on hard surfaces in poor shoes. Your shoulders are rounded from carrying heavy loads. You develop arthritis in your joints, but there's no time to rest because rest means no income. Your tools are basic and require constant maintenance. Your spinning wheel needs oiling, your loom needs adjustment, your cooking pots need retinning. You learn to repair everything yourself because hiring craftsmen is expensive, and a broken tool can mean lost income you can't afford to lose. The competition from other women is fierce. Everyone is trying to sell similar goods to the same limited customer base. You compete on price, quality, and reputation, knowing that losing customers to a neighbour might mean not having enough money for food. You form alliances with other women when possible, but ultimately, everyone is fighting for economic survival in a system that offers very few opportunities for women to earn money. Your body has become a catalogue of medieval medical horrors, each ache and pain a reminder that healthcare in your time consists mainly of prayer, superstition, and hoping that whatever's wrong with you isn't fatal. Your daily existence is an ongoing negotiation with physical discomfort that would send a modern person straight to the emergency room. The morning ritual of assessing your body's complaints has become as routine as checking the weather. Your back aches from sleeping on a straw mattress that provides about as much support as a pile of leaves. Your joints are stiff from the cold and damp that permeates every medieval dwelling. Your hands are swollen and painful from the constant manual labour that defines your existence. You stretch, wince, and begin another day of ignoring signals that your body desperately needs rest. Your teeth are a particular source of ongoing misery. Medieval dental hygiene consists of chewing on twigs and hoping for the best. Your teeth are yellowed, cracked, and slowly rotting in your head. The pain from a dental decay is a constant throbbing that affects your ability to eat, sleep, and concentrate. You've learned to chew on one side of your mouth, to avoid foods that are too hot or cold, and to live with a level of chronic pain that would be considered intolerable in any reasonable era. When a tooth becomes unbearably painful, your only option is extraction by the local barber surgeon, whose medical training consists mainly of experience with previous patients who may or may not have survived his treatments. The procedure involves no anaesthesia beyond alcohol, crude iron tools that haven't been sterilised, and a prayer that you don't die from infection. You hold still while someone yanks rotting teeth from your skull with instruments that look more like torture devices than medical tools. Your digestive system is in constant rebellion against the limited and questionable food available to you. Your stomach cramps regularly from eating grain that's gone slightly bad, meat that's not quite fresh, and vegetables that have been preserved in salt until they're more mineral than vegetable. Diarrhea is a frequent companion, leaving you weak and dehydrated while you still need to maintain all your daily responsibilities. Parasites are inevitable. You have worms, lice, fleas, and various other creatures that have made your body their home. The itching is constant and maddening, but scratching leads to open wounds that invite infection. You pick lice from your hair and your children's hair with your fingernails, crushing them between your thumb and forefinger in a ritual that marks the end of each day. The fleas bite constantly, leaving you covered in small red welts that itch and burn. Your menstrual cycle continues to be a monthly ordeal of pain and inconvenience. The cramps are debilitating, but there's no concept of taking time off for women's troubles. You work through the pain, change your crude cloth pads when you can, and deal with the embarrassment of occasional leaks that stain your clothing and mark you as unclean. Childbirth has left your body permanently changed. Your abdominal muscles are stretched and weakened. Your back is misaligned from carrying children, and your pelvic floor is damaged from multiple deliveries. You leak urine when you cough, sneeze, or lift heavy objects, but this is considered a normal consequence of motherhood rather than a medical condition that could be treated. Your hands are a map of your working life. Burns from cooking fires have left permanent scars on your fingers and forearms. Cuts from kitchen knives, spinning wheels, and sharp tools have created a network of white lines across your palms. Your fingernails are broken and bleeding from digging in dirt, handling rough materials, and the constant manual labour that defines your existence. Winter brings its own set of health challenges. The cold makes your joints ache with a deep bone-level pain that no amount of layering can ease. Frostbite is a constant risk when you're hauling water from the well or working in the garden. Your lips crack and bleed, your skin becomes dry and flaky, and you develop a persistent cough from breathing air that's filled with smoke from indoor fires. When you or your children get sick, your medical options are limited to folk remedies that may or may not work. You make teas from herbs that you've grown or gathered, hoping that what you've learned from other women is accurate and safe. You apply poultices to wounds, knowing that infection is more likely than healing. You say prayers and hope that whatever illness has struck your family isn't one of the many that medieval medicine has no answer for. The local healer, if there is one, is typically another woman whose knowledge comes from experience rather than formal training. She might prescribe bloodletting for fever, herbs for digestive problems, or prayers for conditions that she doesn't understand. Her treatments are based on the theory that illness comes from an imbalance of bodily humours, a concept that has about as much scientific validity as astrology. Pregnancy and childbirth bring their own health risks that compound with each delivery. Your body never fully recovers from one pregnancy before the next one begins. You develop hemorrhoids, varicose veins, and chronic back pain that makes every movement uncomfortable. Each birth tears your body further, leaving you weaker and more vulnerable to complications. Mental health is not recognised as a legitimate concern. Depression, anxiety, and the emotional toll of constant loss and hardship are considered character flaws rather than medical conditions. You're expected to maintain a cheerful demeanour, regardless of how you actually feel. Crying, complaining, or showing signs of emotional distress mark you as weak or unstable. The cumulative effect of years of poor nutrition, hard physical labour, and inadequate medical care is visible in every woman over 30. You age quickly, your body breaking down under the constant assault of medieval life. Your hair greys early, your skin wrinkles from sun and smoke exposure, and your posture becomes permanently bent from years of heavy lifting and hunched work. Sleep, when you can get it, is often interrupted by pain, worry, or the needs of your family. You've learned to function on minimal rest, but the sleep deprivation affects your judgment, your mood, and your ability to cope with daily stresses. You catnap when you can, stealing moments of rest while spinning or doing other repetitive tasks. Your spiritual life is not a source of comfort, so much as a reminder of your inherent sinfulness and inferior status in God's cosmic hierarchy. Welcome to medieval Christianity, where being born female is your first sin, and everything you do afterward is either an attempt at redemption or further evidence of your corruption. You wake each morning to the sound of church bells that divide your day into segments of obligatory prayer. The bell tower is visible from your window, a stone finger pointing toward heaven that reminds you constantly of your duty to God, your husband, and the natural order that places you firmly at the bottom of the social ladder. The bells ring for matins, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline, a schedule of worship that assumes you have nothing better to do than drop everything and pray. Your daily prayers begin before you're fully awake, kneeling on the cold stone floor beside your bed, while reciting words in Latin that you don't understand. The Ave Maria, the Pater Noster, the Gloria. These become as automatic as breathing, mumbled through cracked lips while your mind races through the day's tasks. You pray for forgiveness, for sins you haven't committed yet, for the souls of children you've lost, and for the strength to endure another day of divinely ordained suffering. The church building itself is a monument to your unworthiness. You enter through doors that are massive, heavy, and designed to make you feel small. The interior is dim, cold, and filled with images of suffering saints and martyrs whose pain serves as inspiration for your own acceptance of hardship. The stone floor is unforgiving beneath your knees during the long services, and the air is thick with incense that makes your eyes water and your throat burn. Your seating in church is determined by your social status and gender. Women sit separately from men, and within the women's section, your position reflects your family's wealth and standing in the community. You kneel on stone floors for hours during services that are conducted entirely in Latin by priests, who might or might not be literate themselves. Your understanding of what's being said comes from whispered translations and the occasional sermon in the vernacular. The priest's sermons are particularly focused on women's inherent sinfulness and the necessity of submission to male authority. You hear regular reminders that Eve's disobedience brought sin into the world, that women are naturally inclined toward temptation and moral weakness, and that your salvation depends on accepting your inferior status with Christian humility. These messages are delivered with the authority of divine revelation, making resistance not just rebellious but heretical. Your confessions to the priest are exercises in admitting to sins that medieval society has defined for you. You confess to pride when you feel satisfaction in your work, to wrath when you're angry at your husband's treatment, to envy when you see other women with easier lives. The priest assigns penances that usually involve additional prayers, fasting, or charitable works that you perform while maintaining all your other responsibilities. The calendar of religious observances dominates your year, with feast days and fast days that disrupt normal routines and create additional work. During Lent, you're expected to give up what little pleasure your life contains, eating even more restrictive diets and spending additional time in prayer. The irony that you're fasting from foods you rarely get to eat anyway is lost on the religious authorities who design these observances. Saints provide models of female behaviour that are simultaneously inspiring and impossible to emulate. You're told to pattern your life after women who chose martyrdom over marriage, virginity over motherhood, and poverty over security. These saints often died young in spectacular ways, their suffering held up as examples of proper Christian womanhood. The message is clear: the more you suffer, the more holy you are. Your religious education consists mainly of memorizing prayers and learning stories that emphasize obedience, suffering, and submission. You learn about the Virgin Mary, whose primary virtue is accepting God's will without question. You learn about female martyrs who chose death over dishonor. You learn about the saved women in the Bible, most of whom are notable for their silence and compliance. The Church's teachings on sexuality create additional layers of guilt and confusion. Sex within marriage is grudgingly permitted for procreation, but enjoying it marks you as lustful and sinful. Sex outside marriage is a mortal sin that damns your soul. Contraception is forbidden, masturbation is sinful, and even thinking about sex is considered spiritually dangerous. Your body's natural desires are framed as temptations that must be resisted. Religious festivals provide some of the few breaks in your routine, but even celebrations are shadowed by religious obligations. Christmas involves additional church services, special foods that strain your budget, and expectations of charity toward those less fortunate, which is challenging when you're barely surviving yourself. Easter requires weeks of preparation, special meals, and intensive religious observance that adds to your workload rather than relieving it. The concept of divine justice provides little comfort when your daily life is filled with suffering and hardship. You're told that your pain in this life will be rewarded in the next, but the next life seems very far away when you're dealing with sick children, economic insecurity, and physical exhaustion. The promise of heavenly reward often feels like a cruel joke designed to keep you compliant. Superstition and folk belief blend with official religion to create a complex system of practices designed to ward off evil and ensure divine protection. You wear religious medals, keep holy relics in your home, and perform rituals that combine Christian prayers with much older traditions. You bless your children, your home, and your work with holy water and prayers, hoping to create a protective barrier against the many dangers that threaten your family. The Church's control extends beyond spiritual matters into every aspect of daily life. Church courts handle marriage disputes, moral offences, and various civil matters. The priest's opinion carries significant weight in community decisions, and his approval or disapproval can affect your family's social standing and economic opportunities. Your relationship with God is mediated entirely through male religious authorities. You cannot read the Bible yourself, assuming you could read at all, because it's written in Latin, and individual interpretation is discouraged or forbidden. Your understanding of divine will comes through priests, bishops, and other male religious figures who interpret God's word for you. Your existence as a medieval woman is defined by an undercurrent of violence that shapes every decision you make, every route you take, and every relationship you form. You live in a world where physical force is the ultimate arbiter of disputes, and your position in society makes you particularly vulnerable to violence from virtually every direction. Domestic violence is not just common, it's legally sanctioned and socially acceptable. Your husband has the right to correct your behaviour through physical punishment, a right that's supported by both civil and religious law. The phrase rule of thumb allegedly comes from the idea that a man shouldn't beat his wife with a stick thicker than his thumb. Not a prohibition against beating, just a guideline for reasonable force. The violence starts small and escalates over time. A slap for speaking out of turn, a shove for moving too slowly, a punch for questioning his decisions. You learn to read his moods, like a survival skill, adjusting your behaviour to avoid triggering his anger. You walk quietly, speak softly, and make yourself small in his presence. The bruises you carry are hidden under your clothes, but the emotional damage seeps into every aspect of your personality. Your children witness this violence and learn that it's normal for men to hit women. Your sons learn that they have the right to use force against females, while your daughters learn to expect and accept abuse as part of their future. The cycle of violence perpetuates itself through generations of families who see domestic abuse as natural and inevitable. Sexual violence is an ever-present threat that you navigate daily. Rape is considered a property crime against your father or husband rather than a crime against you personally. If you're raped, you're often blamed for tempting your attacker or for failing to resist sufficiently. Your testimony in court carries less weight than a man's, and the penalties for rape are often less severe than those for stealing livestock. The threat of sexual assault affects every decision you make about when and where to travel. You avoid being alone whenever possible, especially after dark or in isolated areas. When you must travel, you do so in groups and along well-travelled routes. You dress modestly, not just for religious reasons, but because provocative clothing, by medieval standards, can be used to justify assault. Street violence is common in medieval towns and cities. Disputes are settled with fists, knives, or whatever weapons are available. You've seen men killed over gambling debts, women beaten for market disputes, and children injured in brawls that erupt over seemingly minor disagreements. The streets are dangerous places where verbal arguments quickly escalate to physical violence. War brings its own forms of violence that affect women disproportionately. When armies pass through your area, they take what they want from local populations. Soldiers rape women, steal food and livestock, and destroy property with impunity. You've learned to hide when armed men approach, taking your children and whatever valuables you can carry to caves, forests, or other hiding places. The legal system offers little protection for women who are victims of violence. Courts are run by men, laws are written by men, and justice is administered according to male perspectives on what constitutes reasonable behaviour. Women's testimony is considered less reliable than men's, and female victims are often viewed with suspicion rather than sympathy. Even seeking help for violence can be dangerous. Complaining about your husband's abuse might result in more severe beatings for being a troublemaker. Reporting sexual assault might lead to accusations that you are complicit or that you're lying for attention. The social stigma of being a victim often outweighs any potential benefits of seeking justice. Your physical vulnerability is compounded by economic dependence. You can't leave an abusive husband because you have no way to support yourself and your children. Women's economic opportunities are so limited that staying with an abusive man is often the only alternative to starvation. You're trapped in violent relationships by a society that offers no realistic escape routes. The violence you experience is often justified through religious and social teachings that emphasize women's need for male control. You're told that your husband's violence is God's way of keeping you on the righteous path, that suffering is good for your soul, and that submitting to abuse is a form of Christian virtue. The very institutions that should protect you instead provide justification for your abuse. Pregnancy and childbirth make you even more vulnerable to violence. Domestic abuse often escalates during pregnancy, when you're less able to defend yourself or escape. You're carrying precious cargo that your husband values, but you're also more dependent on his protection and less able to fight back when he becomes violent. Your daughters face the same cycle of violence that you've experienced. You try to prepare them for what's coming while hoping that their lives might be different. You teach them to be cautious around men, to avoid situations that might provoke violence, and to accept abuse as part of their fate as women. The knowledge that you're training your own children for lives of victimization weighs heavily on your conscience. The normalization of violence affect your mental state in ways that you don't fully understand. You develop a hypervigilance that never allows you to fully relax, constantly scanning for threats and preparing for the next assault. You blame yourself for violence that's perpetrated against you, wondering what you did to deserve it and how you might prevent it in the future. Community responses to violence against women range from indifferent to actively harmful. Neighbours might intervene if abuse is extreme and public, but private domestic violence is considered a family matter. Women who are repeatedly victimised are often viewed as somehow deserving their fate, either through their own bad behaviour or as punishment for unnamed sins. The intersection of violence and poverty creates additional vulnerabilities. Poor women are more likely to be victims of violence and less likely to have resources for protection or escape. You're caught in a cycle where violence makes you poorer and poverty makes you more vulnerable to violence. So you've managed to survive to the ripe old age of 45, which in medieval terms makes you practically ancient. Congratulations on outlasting most of your contemporaries. You're now a living testament to the human capacity for endurance, though your body is a catalogue of every hardship you've survived. Your appearance reflects the toll that medieval life has taken on your body. Your hair, what's left of it, is grey and thin from years of poor nutrition and stress. Your face is deeply lined from sun exposure, smoke inhalation, and the constant tension of survival. Your posture is permanently bent from decades of hunched labour, and you move with the careful gait of someone whose joints have been worn down by years of hard use. Your hands tell the story of your working life in permanent scars, calluses, and deformed joints. Arthritis has set in early and aggressively, making simple tasks like spinning or cooking increasingly painful. Your fingers are crooked from old injuries that healed poorly, and your grip strength has diminished to the point where opening jars or lifting heavy objects requires assistance. The physical pain that you've learned to ignore throughout your life has now become impossible to dismiss. Your back aches constantly from the compressed vertebrae and damaged muscles that are the legacy of carrying heavy loads and maintaining poor posture. Your hips and knees creak and groan with every step, making walking a conscious effort rather than an automatic function. Your eyesight has deteriorated from years of working by inadequate light. The fine needlework that once provided income is now beyond your capabilities, and reading, if you ever learned how, has become impossible. You squint constantly, trying to bring the world into focus through eyes that have been damaged by smoke, poor nutrition, and the natural aging process accelerated by harsh living conditions. Your hearing has been affected by years of exposure to loud environments, the constant noise of medieval life, from hammering and grinding to shouting and livestock. You find yourself asking people to repeat themselves, straining to catch conversations that seem to happen just outside your auditory range. The world has become muffled, adding another layer of isolation to your already challenging existence. Your role in the household has shifted from primary worker to supervisor and advisor. Your daughters-in-law have taken over the heaviest physical tasks, though you're still expected to contribute whatever labour you can manage. You find yourself training younger women in the skills you've spent a lifetime perfecting, passing down knowledge of food preservation, textile production, and household management. The wisdom you've accumulated comes at the cost of everything you once found beautiful in life. You know exactly how much grain it takes to survive a winter, which herbs might help with various ailments, and how to stretch meagre resources through times of scarcity. But this knowledge is purchased with decades of deprivation, loss, and constant worry about survival. Your social status has become ambiguous. As an older woman, you're respected for your experience and survival, but you're also seen as increasingly irrelevant. Your opinions carry weight in domestic matters, but your physical inability to contribute to heavy labour makes you economically marginal. You're valued as a source of knowledge, but seen as a burden when resources are scarce. The deaths of your children, and by now you've probably buried at least half of them, have left emotional scars that never fully heal. You've learned to love deeply while expecting loss, to invest in relationships while preparing for grief. Each funeral has taken a piece of your heart, until you sometimes wonder if there's enough left to care about new grandchildren who face the same uncertain future. Your relationship with your husband, if he's still alive, has evolved into something resembling a business partnership based on mutual dependence rather than affection. You've weathered decades together, surviving poverty, loss and hardship through a combination of necessity and stubborn endurance. Romance has long since been replaced by practical cooperation and shared history. Your religious faith has been tested by decades of suffering and loss, but it remains your primary source of hope and meaning. You pray more frequently now, partly because you have more time, and partly because death feels closer with each passing day. Your prayers have evolved from requests for help to expressions of gratitude for survival and pleas for a peaceful death. The prospect of widowhood looms as both a threat and a potential liberation. If your husband dies first, you'll face economic insecurity and social vulnerability, but you'll also be free from his control for the first time in your adult life. Widows occupy a unique position in medieval society, still women, but no longer under direct male authority, which creates both opportunities and dangers. Your legacy is not recorded in written history, but lives in the skills you've taught your daughters, the recipes you've passed down, and the survival strategies you've shared with younger women. Your life's work has been the preservation and transmission of knowledge that keeps families alive, though this contribution will never be acknowledged or celebrated. The younger women in your community look at you with a mixture of respect and fear. Respect for your survival and knowledge, fear that your fate will be theirs. You see yourself in their faces, remembering when you too were young, and believe that life might be easier for you than it had been for your mother. Your body has become a living museum of medieval medicine's limitations. You carry the permanent reminders of every injury that healed poorly, every illness that was treated with remedies that did more harm than good, and every childbirth that left you weaker and more damaged. You're a walking testament to the human body's capacity to endure punishment and continue functioning. Sleep becomes increasingly elusive as your body finds fewer comfortable positions and your mind refuses to quiet. You lie awake reviewing the decisions of your life, wondering about roads not taken and possibilities that never materialized. The darkness is filled with the ghosts of children you've lost, dreams you've abandoned, and the weight of all the small compromises that allowed you to survive. The approach of death is not terrifying so much as it is a relief to contemplate. You've lived longer than most, endured more than anyone should have to, and accomplished the basic goal of medieval existence, survival. Death represents not failure, but completion. The end of a life spent fighting against odds that were stacked against you from the moment you drew your first breath. Your final legacy will be measured not in wealth or achievement, but in the simple fact that you survived long enough to pass on the knowledge that allows others to survive. In a world where most women die young, reaching old age is itself a form of victory, even if that victory feels more like endurance than triumph. And there you have it, a lifetime of medieval womanhood distilled into its brutal essence. From the moment you drew your first breath in that smoke-filled birthing chamber to the final painful steps of old age, your existence has been defined by limitations, dangers, and a society determined to remind you of your inferior status at every possible opportunity. Tonight we've walked through the reality of what it meant to be born female in an era when survival was an achievement and happiness was a luxury reserved for the fortunate few. We've seen how every aspect of your life, from your childhood education to your deathbed prayers, was shaped by a system that viewed women as necessary but inferior, valuable but dangerous, sacred but sinful. The irony of medieval womanhood is that despite being considered the weaker sex, you were expected to endure hardships that would break anyone. You carried children while working fields, managed households while surviving on minimal nutrition, and maintained families while having no legal rights or social protection. Your strength was undeniable, but it was a strength born of necessity rather than recognition. Your story is one of millions of women whose lives were consumed by the simple act of survival. No monuments mark your struggles, no histories record your achievements, no songs celebrate your endurance. Your legacy lives in the skills passed down through generations of women, in the recipes that kept families fed, and in the quiet knowledge that allows societies to function. The medieval world that we've explored tonight was not designed for human flourishing, it was designed for human endurance. And somehow, against all odds, you endured. You survived plagues that decimated populations, famines that brought entire regions to their knees, and wars that devastated everything in their path. You outlasted most of your children, buried your friends, and watched empires rise and fall, while you continued the daily work of keeping life going. Your existence was a masterclass in making the best of impossible circumstances. You found love in arranged marriages, joy in children who might not survive, and meaning in work that was never acknowledged. You created beauty in a world that offered little, maintained hope despite overwhelming evidence that life was brutal and short, and passed on wisdom that helped others navigate the same treacherous path. The sounds that defined your life, the spinning wheel's rhythm, the baby's cry, the church bells marking time, these became the soundtrack to existence measured not in achievements, but in survival. You learned to find satisfaction in small victories, a successful harvest, a child who lived to adulthood, a winter that you survived with food still in storage. Your body became a map of medieval life, scars from kitchen accidents, calluses from manual labour, bent spine from carrying heavy loads, and hands that told the story of every task you performed. You wore your survival in your posture, your gait, and the careful way you moved through a world that was constantly trying to injure or kill you. The relationships that sustained you were forged in shared hardship rather than mutual choice. Your friendships with other women were built on the understanding that you were all fighting the same battle against a society that offered few opportunities and fewer protections. You supported each other through childbirth, shared resources during famines, and provided the emotional strength that allowed each other to continue. Your spiritual life was complicated by a religion that simultaneously offered hope for the afterlife and justification for your suffering in this one. You found comfort in prayer while struggling with teachings that labelled your very existence as fundamentally flawed. Faith became a tool for survival rather than a source of joy, something to cling to when everything else failed. The knowledge you accumulated was practical and immediate: which plants could heal, how to preserve food, when to plant crops, how to care for the sick. This wisdom was passed down through generations of women, creating an informal network of survival information that was as valuable as any formal education. Your dreams, such as they were modest by necessity. You hoped for healthy children, adequate food, a husband who wasn't too violent, and perhaps enough prosperity to ensure your family's survival. The grand ambitions that define modern life were luxuries you couldn't afford in a world where tomorrow's survival was never guaranteed. The silence that surrounded your achievements is perhaps the most tragic aspect of your story. History remembers kings and bishops, warriors and merchants, but the women who made civilization possible through their daily labour remain largely invisible. Your contributions were so fundamental that they were taken for granted, so universal that they were never considered worthy of record. Yet in that silence lies a different kind of power. You were part of an unbroken chain of women who ensured that humanity continued despite wars, plagues, famines, and social upheaval. Your quiet persistence in the face of overwhelming odds represents a form of heroism that goes unrecognised because it was so common, so necessary, so completely woven into the fabric of medieval life. As you settle into sleep tonight, remember that the struggles we've explored together represent the lived experience of countless women who came before us. Their endurance made our modern world possible. Their sacrifices paved the way for freedoms we take for granted, and their quiet heroism deserves recognition even if it was never recorded in the history books. The medieval woman story is ultimately one of resilience in the face of systematic oppression, love in the midst of constant loss, and hope despite overwhelming evidence that life was brutal and short. She represents the fundamental strength of the human spirit when tested by circumstances that would break anyone who hadn't been forged in the furnace of medieval existence. So as you drift off to sleep, spare a thought for these forgotten women who lived lives of quiet desperation and stubborn persistence. They deserve to be remembered, not just for their suffering, but for their incredible strength in the face of a world that was determined to break them. They survived so that we could thrive, endured so that we could flourish, and persevered so that future generations might know something better than mere survival. Sleep well, knowing that your own struggles, whatever they may be, are part of a long tradition of human endurance. And perhaps tomorrow will seem a little brighter when viewed against the backdrop of what women endured in the medieval world, when survival itself was the highest achievement and every day lived was a small victory against impossible odds. Thank you for joining me on this journey through medieval womanhood. Sweet dreams, and remember, you're stronger than you know, more resilient than you imagine, and part of an unbroken chain of women who refused to give up, no matter how dark the world became around them. Good night.